Okay, we're going to shoot a quick video here on installing a Vaillant cold air intake. This is the 16157. This is a kit for Jeep Grand Cherokee WK2. This is a 2017 5.7 liter Hemi. The kit states that this is not a correct fit for this vehicle. I've done some research on this, and apparently the only difference here on the newer vehicles is this small bracket right here. And I've seen a couple other videos where this bracket's pretty easy to remove. We'll see how that goes as we move along here. I'm going to replace the stock airbox, this tube, this big piece on the front of the motor here, and I'll get started in just a second. Alright, so this is a really easy install to do. Great thing for someone to do that's never worked on their vehicle before, or a super quick and easy install for somebody who's pretty seasoned. First thing we gotta do is pop this Hemi cover off the top of the motor here. It's just plastic. It's easiest if we grab this fuel filler cap and get it out of the way first. This is just set on a few posts and it pops right off. You can put your finger right under the side, pop one side, fingers under the other side, and pop that off, and the whole cover just lifts right out. These are the little pieces that it sits on inside, and that's going to give us the access that we need to get this clamp off right there, and I'm going to go to that next. I'm going to do this basically with nut drivers, which are super easy to use. Just got an 8mm nut driver here. It's my tool of choice for doing this job. I've done a couple of them. I'm going to loosen this clamp on the front of the motor. Go over and hit this other clamp on the airbox. We will need to come in and get this sensor out of here. I won't do this on camera because I'll need two hands to get in there and press the little clip in on the side to pull that off, and then we transfer that sensor over to the new airbox. There's one more bolt that has to come out of here, and that is this one. And we'll just back this one out right now, and then I'll get everything loose and pull it out. So everything's loose here. This sensor is pulled out of here. Be cautious of that piece, we don't want to break that off. That bolts out. This clamp is loose. Clamp on the airbox is loose. This should all come out super easy now. There we go. First big piece out of the way here. And next we're going to go over to the airbox here. This tube is going to be reused. You can just work that off of there. It's just a quick pull. There's no clamp on that at all. Just tuck this out of the way because we'll need that again later. And now the airbox needs to come out of here. And on the front of the airbox here, the trim, there's a little clip underneath here that holds it, and it's one of these Christmas tree fasteners. You can use a trim tool to pull it out, but I usually just work it back and forth and it'll pop right out, and that's going to go into the new airbox. So it's just a hair easier to get this piece out if we just pop the top of this airbox off. Get the clamps from around the side. Cover lifts right off. Pull the stock air filter out, which is starting to look a little dirty. I'm at 11,000 miles here, so it was time for a filter change anyway. So the bottom of this airbox is just held on with some of these rubber grommets, and they set on posts. So you just got to kind of wiggle this out of here. We're going to need to reuse at least one of these grommets on the new box. I'm going to need two hands to do this, so I'm just going to set the phone down. But you'll see this whole piece comes out, and this is going to be replaced by the new airbox. Okay, so I'm down to the part I haven't done before, and that's where we're going to need to get rid of this bracket right here. And we're going to try to just bend it and break it off right here at the body. All these just going to come out of these clips pretty easily, and we'll just zip tie these out of the way in a little bit. I gotta check and see how that bottom one comes out a little closer. Alright, so that bottom clip just required a screwdriver to get that clip open, and those three, I believe one of these is the hood release. One looks like, this looks like the hose that goes to the rear windshield washer, and this is probably one of the air lines for the suspension, but not 100% sure. These have plenty of room. We'll just tuck them, zip tie them out of the way later. I'll hold on to this bracket just in case I ever want to put anything back to stock. And but we're going to break this tab off, so it's probably going to be worthless. But I will keep it and keep them together. Okay, so this will probably be the most difficult part of the entire install here. I'm just going to get on this piece with these vice grips, and I'm just going to crank it back and forth till it snaps off the wall there. And if I need to get in there with the Dremel, clean it up after, put a little touch-up paint on it so we don't get any rust issues, we will. But we'll see how it breaks off. Almost there. Alright, so it's got a little bit of a jagged edge there. It's going to be completely covered by the box, so I was just going to get in here and sort of peen that over with a little hammer, and we'll see what it looks like after. So I just got in here with a small ball peen hammer and peened this piece over just a little bit. Chip the paint off there. Just be real careful that you're only hitting that piece and nothing else. I'm going to grab a little bit of black touch-up paint that I have and just hit that bare metal so we don't ever have any issues with rust there. Okay, so this is the unboxing. So you can see what comes in the box from Vaillant. I've already been into this before, but these are all the parts that come minus the packaging. You get some instructions from Vaillant, which you see here basically just show how everything goes together. We got the intake tube. You got the connectors, the rubber connectors along with the clamps. I believe that's the one that goes on this end. Yes, because this is the reducer that goes in to the stock engine intake. This is where, is it the mass airflow sensor? That little sensor that we took off before. We gotta pull it out of the other box and stick it in here. Make sure it's going the same direction. Here's the air filter. This is the oiled one. That was my choice when I ordered. Worked fine for me on my last Jeep, so I'm gonna go with it again. And then get a little carb sticker, and this is a bracket that you need on the back side of the box to support it to the Jeep. Got that, and then this is the actual air box. And what you see is on the bottom here, this is where one of those rubber grommets needs to be moved over from the other. And then this is where that little trim piece, where the hood closes, pops right over there. And you will see this is where the air has a little bit more of a straight shot to come right into the box on this one. The whole thing just looks a little nicer in the engine bay. Give this a quick test fit here. It's going to take 2 hands, but I'll be right back. So this is just a dry test fit of where that box sits in here. That trim piece fits perfectly in this little hole in the front of the box. There's the intake. That little bracket that came in the bag goes right between this hole, and you'll need to back that bolt out right there just a little bit. That's right below where we broke off that other bracket and painted it. So that'll attach right to there. And then I need to get the grommets in the bottom of this box. Alright, so this is the bracket that holds the right side of the box. I've got it loosely fit here. That's a factory bolt. It's a 13 millimeter. And what comes with the Volant box is that bolt, and that is an 11 millimeter. So far tools needed on this job, we've got a nut driver that was an 8 millimeter, and we've got the 13 millimeter wrench for here. We needed a pair of vice grips to break that piece off, a little touch-up paint, and now I've got the 11 millimeter for there. So I'm going to go ahead and pop one of the grommets off the bottom of the old air box. Go ahead and grab one of these, and see they pop out super easy. I do have a little silicone out here in the garage if it's a pain to go in the bottom of this other box. We can go ahead and just hit it with a little silicone, but this will be much easier for you when you're doing it with two hands. But there's one hand, and that's seated in there just fine. I'm gonna get the air filter on here, because once we get the box in and bolted in, there's no way to get back in here and get the air filter on there. So we're gonna get that positioned and snugged right up to go in the Jeep. Alright, so once you got your air filter in here and it's all snugged up with that clamp, just make sure it's nice and tight. I'm gonna back this bolt out of here, and we're gonna get this positioned in the engine bay. Got the grommet in the bottom, and we'll get that all ready for the rest of the installation. Alright, so I got the air box sitting where it needs to be. The easiest way to get this position on that one grommet is going to be to take your hand and reach underneath while you're positioning it and feel the little post and the grommet and make sure they come together. Everything lines up pretty well here. We've got this bracket over here, so it's still loose on the body of the Jeep, and once I bolt it to the airbox, I'm not going to have any access to that bolt right there. So I'm going to get this positioned right where it needs to be, tighten up the body bolt, and then I'll put the bolt into the airbox itself. Alright, so that bracket is tight, and we're just going to make the final tightening of this bolt. Secure the airbox here. It's on the one post underneath here, and then the only other connection to make on this is that little Christmas tree fastener here on the trim. It goes into there. It's pretty secure. It's got a little wobble to it, but once we get the rest of this tube hooked up, let's get a little focus in here. And I'm going to move my light so that we get a little better shot of the balance of this. Alright, so this sensor that needs to be moved over to the hole in that tube, just make note of which way it goes. I just always make note that the side that the connector clips into is on your left while you're facing the front of the vehicle. The issue with this is it's got this positive engagement right there. So what I normally do is get under that and pry it up a little bit, as we need to twist this. So it's going to twist counterclockwise once you get that piece up. And again, I need two hands here, so I'm going to just start this by popping that little piece up, and then I'll come right back to it. Alright, so what I did there, you see that little piece? Just pop that up, this turns, and then you can just gently wiggle it out of this hole. And there's a couple of little O-rings on there, so just make sure we remember which way this went. We come down here and this slides into this hole and you just need to work it around because there's no positive engagement on this one. It's just a pressure fit, rubber on rubber. So I'm going to work that one in there. And again, if you need to put a little bit of silicone spray on this to work it in easier, do that. I wouldn't spray it on the sensor. I'm just not sure if that would gum it up or not. Alright, so I got my sensor in. My first try, because it was dry plastic on dry rubber, pushed the grommet right into the tube. So I had to pull it out, reinstall the grommet, and then I just gave the grommet a little tiny shot of some dry silicone spray, and it pushed right in perfectly. And you see that little tab on the side that was the positive engagement on the factory piece is what you can use as a depth gauge for how far to push that in. Again, remember the side that clips in is on our left as we look at the vehicle. So I'm going to get these rubber connections on here, and we're just going to make sure that I orient my hose clamps where it's going to be easiest to gain access to them. If you want to be slick and position them underneath in a spot where you won't see them, do that. I'm fine. I keep them right up on top and just get them lined up so they look decent. Alright, I'm going to put those on, leave the hose clamps on them, and then we'll get that into the vehicle too. I am going to give these rubber pieces a little shot of the silicone just so that they're easier to get on and position while we're putting this piece in. Alright, so I put my connection tube back in here and tightened up. We got the two hose clamps here. Like I said, I just kind of try to put these so that they're in an accessible place where they're at about the same rotation around, just so they look neat when you open the engine bay. These two up here, again, everything's tight, and when you put this in, it really tightens up the whole airbox and the connection. Took our connector, connected that back on. Again, remember, the side that positively engages here, clicks in, is to our left as we're facing the engine bay. And then we've got this other hose that went into the box on the previous airbox, but here it goes into the tube. That's just a pressure fit. And on my last Jeep, I put an extra hose clamp on here, but I don't think it's going to come off. So I'm going to try just going without it. The instructions don't call for any hose clamp. They don't give you a hose clamp. So it's probably just fine. And at this point, really the only thing that's left here, I've checked all my connections, everything's in. No spare parts in the box. I got to get the engine cover back on. And we might need to clock this tube a little bit in a slightly different direction because it used to be on the airbox, on the stock airbox. So I did have a little fitment issue with it on the last Jeep. I'm going to take my oil filler cap back off, and we're going to get that engine cover back on here and just give it a quick wipe down, and I'm ready to go out and take it for a test drive and make sure that everything functions as proper. Alright, so that's the final install. Vaillant cold air intake. It says it's for, I believe, 11 to 15 Jeep Grand Cherokee with 5.7 Hemi. The only issue that we had where it didn't fit was that bracket over here that we broke off. I did take that clip, you won't really see it, but it had come off that bracket for those three pieces that were attached to it, and I just clipped that back on over there. I don't think there's any need to zip tie it in. They're not going anywhere, and they're not near anything that's moving, and they shouldn't rattle. The biggest pain at the end is getting this engine cover to go back on, that the rubber grommets positively engage the upright posts. It just takes a little bit. And again, if you want to spray a tiny little bit of silicone on each one of those rubber grommets, it'll help get those posts through there. I had no fitment issue with this, I believe it's just a breather tube. And everything's nice and tight. So all that's left now is close up the hood and take it out for a run. A lot of people say all sorts of things about cold air intakes. I don't think they build very much horsepower at all, if any. It'll give you a little bit of a throaty growl. I like this one over the open cone filters because they seem to give you this big sucking, whooshing sound that just isn't anything that I'm interested in. So this one ends up just being a little bit throatier. I do think it gives you a tiny bit of a quicker throttle response, but again, that could just be all in my head. I'm hoping at some point we're going to add on to this either a Corsa or a Borla exhaust, probably the Borla because it's a little bit quieter, and then go with a custom tuned Diablo Sport, and hopefully with the intake, exhaust, and a custom tune running a 93 octane, maybe I'll get an extra 30 or 40 horsepower at the crank. Maybe that's optimistic. Anyway, I hope this helped out somebody, and have a great day.